Conversations with Elders, hosted by yours truly, Louis-Virie Blanche, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432, where we will be TED Talking in tongues with the elders of all ages, all generations, all races, cultures, and creeds. All gender, religious, or political preferences will be honored and encouraged on Glastonbury Radio 432, Conversations with Elders, where it is our treasured pleasure to roll out the red carpet of golden liquid love light to you in honor of the Queendom Come, soul dancing free to life's heartbeat drum, in honor of mother, daughter, sister, lover, priestess, goddess, friend, sharing the blessings of love's perfect stranger, Deja Vu, welcoming you to Glastonbury Radio 432.
It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic.
Aloha, hola, aho, hello. I also say fi aloha,
Yes.
fi aho, fi hola, and fi hello. And our brother, Dr. Mosen, is with us once again. And we're journeying through the world of phiometry. And we're going to go today through the concepts of how the mind has a heart, how the heart has a mind. And expand on that for us. You were going to also talk about our intake. We were going to go through the intake consideration that humanity should be aware of.
We have two entity here. One is the logic, and then sometimes the mind is an organ which is outside the body, and the heart is inside the body. But these are interconnected, interrelated, and if they are working in conjunction with each other, we have a whole thinking or whole feeling. Now, for example, if I have a feeling, this feeling has to be directed by wisdom, otherwise it becomes temptation and it's destructive to me. And if I have a wisdom, I have to have some passion, otherwise it becomes it cannot relate. If there's no passion, there is no resonance. Emotation means what? Attraction, emoting. If my wisdom has no emotation, it has no attraction. It cannot relate, or it cannot be taught or related to other people. So wisdom has to have passion, and passion has to have wisdom. That's why the wisdom of the heart, which is the passion, has to be associated with the wisdom of the mind, with the logic of the mind. And the logic of the mind has to be associated with the passion. So when these two work together, we create a series of a sequence of things that happens in our mind and our hearts. And then we get into faculties of these organs later, maybe in a few sessions later. And then, all of a sudden you notice this wisdom with passion and passion with wisdom. It creates a lot of imagination by cognitive perception, because these two are connecting them. When I have cognitive perception, I start the creative imagination, because subculturally we're taught to have critical focus and have a critical view of everything. You look at news media, everything, it's always critical. There's nothing creative. I mean, the same, let's say this is a coronavirus, there's nothing creative right now. Everything is critical. So all of our statistic is critical. So once we have wisdom with emotion and emotion with wisdom, then all of a sudden we create cognitive perception for creative imagination rather than critical focus. And that creative imagination, it induces vision. And the vision with passion, we have to make a motion, and that motion is action. So it becomes creative imagination, vision, passion, and action. And then, with that, our mind becomes creative to create a process, procedure, and practice. And that becomes a subculture and part of our subconscious.
And it becomes the way that you live on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So
Because sometimes, you know, our subconscious is coming from the subculture, and sometimes collective subconsciousness, it produces subculture, becomes esoteric.
so the empathy, the love, the when our inspiration has passion, it's really it's energized.
Yeah.
It's got more field and flow. It must have more
Yeah.
electromagnetic presence, right?
Yeah, because everything in creation is open system or open function. That means, you know, passion induces wisdom. Wisdom induces passion. Without one, without the other one, as Rumi said, it's a flame that burns to its own destruction. Because all of a sudden I'm very passionate, but I could be passionate about wrong stuff, which is not wise. And that's what we call the temptation.
Right, right. Well, you know, I did an interview with the gentleman from Senegal, and he's an Islamic. He believes in one of the things I forget the leader that he was inspired by, but one of the things he spoke of is that the temptation is something that a person has to deal with all their life because the shadow side wants to express itself. So you have to keep an eye on that and be disciplined and devoted to, he said, like truth and honor were very, very, his tribe is this Sarah tribe in Senegal. And it's very important for them to have truth and honor. But their passion is like, you are my friend. And because you are my friend, I'm willing to do anything I can in the world. If I
Yeah.
see you have a need, my heart and my mind says, I must help my friend, and I am devoted to that for life. So when we have empathy and love and respect and reverence, it
Yeah.
infuses us, it gives us, it's like we're charged, aren't we supercharged?
Yeah.
That gives us the passion that we can combine our wisdom with. And the harmony of heart and mind, you know, there's a lot of talk about heart mind.
Yeah. See, I have some stuff that I can maybe bring it up some other time, but there's these four components of human being, which is like, I don't use the spiritual because we cannot define it. We call it divinity.
Divinity.
Divinity, divide mental, emotional, and physical. Now, changing my divinity is actually my knowledge, because all the knowledge comes from the source. Changing what I know is knowledge. Now, changing what I think with my wisdom is what is my attitude. And then changing what I feel is my motivation. And changing what I can do. We have to do all those things to have to be a whole person or to get whole action. Changing what I can do as I improve it, it's my skill. So now, if my emotionality becomes more than my mentality, that's temptation. For example, I know smoking a cigarette is bad for my health, but I say it feels good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if my mentality becomes more than my divinity, then I become very selfish because I disregard all the empirical revelation to nature or creator and creation in peace. So that's why we have to have a hierarchy of divinity over mentality, mentality over emotionality, and emotionality over physicality, because it's my skill. My knowledge should govern my attitude, which is changing what I think, my wisdom. In changing what I feel is my motivation. I have to have my attitude kind of overrides my motivation, and my motivation, the passion for my action or my skill. So it's knowledge, and after that becomes attitude or wisdom, and attitude over emotion, which is motivation, and then motivation over a skill. So we have to have that hierarchy between these levels. And then everything is in control and in creative. Otherwise, it becomes critical. Because let's say, if I do a skill with no motivation, I get tired, I may still, a little bit here and there, and my motivation becomes more than my mentality, attitude. Then it's temptation. And then attitude or my wisdom becomes more than, knowledge, which is the true knowledge from creator and creation. Then all of a sudden I become very self-centered narcissist. So the narcissism has a definition in all major religions. And it's the first time I think people are noticing it. We had a good example.
To give thanks for that. These
yeah. I mean,
they're examples not to follow, but examples of what not to do.
exactly. If you know that poet Omar Khayyam, you've heard of that poet. It says, "How did you learn your manner?" Here's the poem. It says, "How did you learn your manner?" And then he answers, "From those who didn't have it, from those who didn't have it." Because he said, "How?" He says, "Whatever they did, I didn't do it."
Yes. But it's amazing. The person showing you that may not have the wisdom of knowing what they're doing, but they're a gift to you because they're setting example to not be followed.
Yeah. Because you have that creative imagination,
Mm-hmm.
which induces vision. And then your vision has to be verified with what? By empirical revelation from the nature. The nature does not have duality, it has polarity. If it was positive and negative, we wouldn't have any fruits. The bees didn't know what to do.
Well, when you speak of the power that inspiration gives us and what it leads us to think, how we act, it becomes our process, a procedure that we practice.
Yeah.
And, we've talked a lot about in the laboratory when scientists are experimenting with things, they are creating systems. But if we observe around us, we see how things function.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, a lot of things that had one time been considered not to be worthy of consideration become universal laws, or at least accepted for a while. Now, if the laws of science that are accepted in 5 years ago no longer make it 5 years from now,
Yes.
they didn't have wisdom.
Yeah. Because they didn't have that surrender, submission, service to creator and creation. Yeah. Because I came up with my assumption. How many times I have made assumption in my life, and a few years later, I found that it was temptation.
I can outsmart creator, I think I can.
Yeah.
This creation is not really, something's wrong with it. I want to change it.
If I even be honest, I cannot even outsmart a blade of grass. I cannot smart one seed.
Because inherent in that blade of grass, in that seed, there's immense wisdom and passion. It doesn't need any guidance from someone else to tell it how to do what it's supposed to do.
That's why we have to make a distinction between revelation and literalism, because a lot of religion that has turned people off, it has become literalism, not revelation. Revelation in all religions is the same. There is no conflict. Otherwise, God would send a different message to different people. So what happened here is revelation. When it's revelation, you notice it's all functional. It's not system. And all variables are working together peacefully in peace. All variables. But here, you give me a grant and you give me a white coat and put me in a laboratory and you give me a nice window So I look out, but I don't look out. And everything I do is on limited variable. It's a single, and what do they call it? Forgot the word now. You said it last time, double, single study and double study. I have
Double blind study, a double blind study.
Oh yeah, I have to write this. I keep forgetting this.
Double
Single
blind.
blind.
But if the laboratory, if you get your white jacket and the money to do research, chances are you're going to keep repeating whatever they want you to do in order to get more money.
Well, yeah, I have to satisfy you because you gave me the money.
So your thoughts and your wisdom are being controlled by an outside source.
I have to come with a formula and result that you like it. Otherwise, my grant is come to halt. Now, what happened here, in my experiment, I do a few wrong things. First of all, it's only one or two variables. Empirical revelation is all variables. So there is no side effect. That's why I have side effect, because I didn't take account all those other variables. Then I come and in order to give you a report, I use an equation. I use that toxic sign, equal sign. Those two lines. I equivocate this with that, and if I cannot equivocate it based on my assumptions and my experiment, I put a coefficient. And I smudge it a little bit, you fudge it a little bit, and then I put something around it and give it to you. So you see, all of a sudden, there's a handicap in experimental results. That's why 10 years, 5 years later, I may not even agree with it myself.
So those are theoretical concepts. Someone has an idea, is if it's in the laboratory and they're working in a laboratory, but what if you're out in nature? Nature is your laboratory and you're taking a walk through nature and you're inspired by something, and what inspires you inspires more thought. You
Yes.
could perhaps come up with what, could it be called theoretical, that your inspiration that you gained from observing nature,
Yes.
it was at one point theoretical, but proved itself to be eternal and universal?
Yeah. But what happens, in nature, everything is reality. There is no theory. Because theory sometimes is questionable. I may make a theory and you may not like it, or vice versa, or maybe, somebody else make it, you may not agree with their assumption. And that's why, just that kind of trend of science, always in the history, just this one proved the other one was wrong. Or somebody himself, he finds out that his assumption was not correct.
So if ancient civilizations had a better understanding of nature,
Yeah.
and invaders came in and used the divide and conquer certain methods to dominate people, and they decided that way that these people are doing it is pagan, it's old-fashioned, it's superstitious, doesn't make sense. We're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're living at a time where lots of things that were done in ancient civilizations, they knew something. They may not have had telescopes and microscopes, but they knew something about the world they lived in.
They had, we'll get to this in sometime later, but they had their faculty of soul, the faculty of mind, the faculty of heart, working with nature. I am only digital these days. I only can do this.
How many people can imagine you're sitting outside beneath the sky? You don't have a TV, no gadgets, no remote controls. And all night long, you looking and listening. You're looking at the sky. You're listening to the sounds around you, and you do that day after day, month after month, week after week. I mean, you do it year after year, and you're like in this beautiful relationship with the sky and the wind and the trees and everything around you. You can't help but be educated.
You know, what happened if you look at today, everything, there's a lot of speakers on TED. TED, you know,
Right. Yes.
that all of a sudden, this digital communication, all of a sudden has so much psychological stress and social stress on people. And we are all talking against it because everything has become cellular communication. Now, when I have cellular communication, I don't have cellular communication. Now, the faculties of the soul, one of the most important faculties of the soul, which is the most important organ in our existence, existential reality, is will.
The
Because
will.
my will has already made by this digital, because the result is that it has a circle in my under, everything is circle, everything equal sign, and everything is duality. So my soul cannot identify itself with that. So my will is gone.
So
I
living
don't
on
have any will. I don't have any will. I'm a puppet to what? My cellular communication.
and
Excuse me.
some people say you become a slave to the system.
Yeah. It's cellular, it's slavery.
Well, the idea of working for a living, you
Yeah.
know, the when I go to places like Jamaica, when I went to Jamaica in the 70s, you know, the people they didn't really, a lot of places didn't have running water. People were very accustomed to walking several miles and bringing
Yeah.
water back to where they lived. But, you know, they knew, the people that lived on the land knew where the mango trees were blossoming, where the banana trees, the plantain, all the plants, they were very aware of the time of the year that these things would be plentiful.
Yeah.
But then, of course, when the idea of having cities on the coast for tourists to come and visit, it became attractive to people that used to live in the hills and live in nature. They wanted to go to the city and get a job with, you know, some corporation. Maybe they wash dishes, maybe they're a manager, maybe they're, you know, they work on the tennis court. They, you know, they have different jobs. But then along came, a lot of times in Jamaica, what happened, like what's going on right now with COVID, what happened with sometimes hurricanes come along, but right now with COVID, they're not allowing any planes to fly in and out of the country. So the tourist market, which depends on people coming from other places, and if your check that you get paid every week is dependent upon the tourist trade, you've forgotten where the mangoes are blossoming. You forgot about the banana trees and the way that you used to eat, because you've become dependent. You're in the city and you have to have a job. And so a lot of people, when they found they weren't able to make a living, the tourist trade was going down in business, they were thankful if they had someone in the hills, someone that still lived off the land, because they knew they could always eat, they would always have food and shelter, and they could even make their clothing from the plants.
See, what has happened in terms of human culture, if you notice, it has become centralized.
Mm-hmm.
Centralization, let's say city.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I come to the city, I cannot produce in the city structure anymore. I become a consumer. So this mass migration from producer to consumer, it has destroyed production, natural. Now, when this happens, the velocity of culture has to go up, bring the food faster and faster and faster. Otherwise, by the time you get it to market, it's not usable. And then I have to use chemical to protect it, to get it to you.
Make it last.
So I give it some kind of like ethylene dibromide or something like that. I give it something to that fruit that no bugs like it. And if the bugs don't like it, I'm the only one who eats it.
The birds and the bees don't like it, but humans eat it.
Now, as a result, cancer used to be 1 out of 50, 1 out of 150, 170 years ago. It's becoming 1 out of 3 or close to 1 out of 2.
Oh,
Because this slide that I want to show you, because if you put something, it doesn't have vibration, it cannot bring your pH up. It cannot really, it's like, a light bulb, you put it to a plug, but there's no electricity in the plug.
well, let's go to that intake, the understanding of the intake, the accumulation, assimilation. You had alkaline and acidity.
Yes. And it has to be assimilative, not accumulative.
Right.
That means assimilative, it has the size of things I take. It has to be broken in pieces that can go through the cell gates into the cell. If it's too big and it cannot be broken down in the, let's say, a stomach or intestine, it cannot go in the hole.
It accumulates on your body as excess weight.
Yeah, it becomes cellular swamp.
You're carrying around a lot of toxins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why you notice all of a sudden, for no reason, the person, very quickly becomes very overweight.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I had this here. Is our PowerPoint connected?
Yes, you should be.
Let's see.
Excuse me.
Oh, here it is. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
If you, I have to push the button, I guess, right? Share a screen.
Yes.
Let's see, share screen. Share.
There it's coming.
It's this one that we were just talking about. Everything has to be assimilative, not accumulative. That means just the physical side.
Right.
It has to be alkaline, not acidic, because when something has alkaline, it has potential electricity, magnetism. And then it has to be, can you see this here?
Yes, regulatory and
not a stimulatory. That means, so it doesn't really override my autonomic nervous system. That means, for example, when we have a food, autonomic nervous system, digestive system goes to sympathetic. That means the blood is speed up and becomes more active. And that's why other system, this is a body energy management. It's energy management. That's why the other systems, they kind of calm down. The best example is siesta after lunch.
yes.
Not cigarette. So
allow the parasympathetic system to do its.
Yes. So we have to really surrender, submit to this process that this body was created based on.
Now, this dietary intake, can that be looked at on a mental, emotional? Right now, we're talking physical intake, right?
Yes. Yeah. it's equally, emotionally is even more important, and mentally is even more, because emotional pH, let's say I have a perfect pH of 7.4. If I'm emotionally, let's say I'm in a state of jealousy or greed, or any of those negative emotion, hate, or this and that, my emotional pH crashes. No matter how good physically I was alkaline, it overdrives it. Now, if some of these emotions, is not forgiven or repentful about it, then what happens? It becomes accumulated. These emotions accumulated, and it becomes trauma. And all of a sudden, it stays in my brain, just like this is the hard disk.
Mm-hmm.
And every time by cognitive perception or whatever reason I refer to any of those, it brings my emotional pH down and then over my physical. So all those faculties have their own pH.
Now, the role that the pH factor plays a role in all aspects of our existence, really.
Yes, it's basically, it puts us in a state that we have magnetic synergy. My emotion needs magnetic synergy, otherwise I'll be desperately depressed. My mental has to have that magnetic magnability in order to have willpower. Otherwise, the trauma become full. Every time, if I'm not in the creative mode, I get into critical mode. I'm constantly depressed. I'm constantly thinking about all my traumas, which is everybody has those because life is full of stress. But when it becomes accumulative, it becomes distress.
So to alleviate or to make sure you don't accumulate negative emotion,
Yeah.
one would make use of empathy, forgiveness,
Repentance.
repentance.
There was another slide here. It's what we associate ourselves by resonance. So we become in control of our resonance by wisdom. That means you resonate with truth. You resonate with not jealousy. You don't resonate with greed. All those things.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of become you become the master of your own resonation.
And if you're not, you're instead of being having a regulatory system that has a balanced field and flow, you're out of balance, and you're going to have to try and make up that with stimulants.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I choose not to control it myself, I have to take some drug to stimulate when I wake up and something to destimulate me when I want to go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say the hell with my autonomic nervous system because I have a science can do all that for me. I don't.
You're overriding this natural function
Yes.
with the human system. But how long are we coming to a point where more and more of humanity is waking up to seeing that something is not quite right?
Because what happens, people unknowingly they're questioning the fact why things are getting harder, why
Mm-hmm.
things are not getting better, why we have more problems, more diseases, and all that. And that goes back to one of the first um, conversation we had about entropy. Everything has become entropical. Entropy is defined by any scientist, means any solution to an entropical process, procedure, and practice is further and deeper entropy and some of unknown nature. Those unknown natures are what? Side effects we haven't figured out why we have it. All of a sudden my whole body itches. Oh my, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's entropy. Now entropy it has become the foundation of our subculture, and that's why politics has become entropical. And the economy has become entropical. It's an economical, entropical economy. our health and medicine has become entropical, more side effects.
But the centropy is available to us.
Yes, that's why your most important organ, which the organ of the soul, the will, if you're liberated in your mind and your passion. I don't mean you, I mean just anybody, me.
Yes.
You know, but if I am liberated in my soul and my passion and my mind, then I can make a decision on those issues. My will becomes what? My will becomes most important driver for me.
So if your will is to serve creator and creation, to surrender in submission to serving creator and creation in peace, trying that more and more, you might see differences in your life and differences in the world around you.
And why? Because now I am in resonance with everything around me.
Yes.
With the people, with the trees, you know, with animals and all that. I am not destroying there because I think, you know, my assumption was if I destroy the nature or if I become smarter than nature, I control the nature.
Well, you know, their landfills we're finding it's hard to get rid of all of our.
Hello, I'm on my interview, so sorry about that.
No problem. So this consumer-oriented living, we buy things, we throw away what we don't use, and there's so much. You know, you talked before about the input-output. Differentiate the process of assimilation helps to prevent all the accumulation that might be in our bodies, in the air, in the land. We won't find that we have to keep digging holes to bury things that don't go away. The things we bury are the things we throw in the rivers, you know. Well, we'll just get rid of it and pour it in here and it'll be fine. But it comes back to haunt us.
Yes. You know, what happened, a lot of that is, if you look at, for example, commercial. The commercial main purpose is to induce a temptation for forced consumption.
Forced
consumption. Yeah, or induced consumption. So they do it in a way that I am really induced, evoked to go and buy this product, even if I don't need it.
Right. Well, you know, they say houses have gotten larger and everyone has a 2 or 3 car garage, but they can't put the car in the garage because there's so much stuff in the garage. And no one, you know, you can have a yard sale every weekend and still have a lot of stuff left. And, you know, you just keep building up more stuff. Like you said before, I know a person that's so poor, so poor, that all they have is money.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, I know poor people, wealthier than rich people.
Yes.
You know, so what happens here, there was a psychologist at, I think, University of Chicago by name of George Gerbner. He wrote many good articles and books on cultivation theory. He's very famous for that, cultivation. If I want to tempt you, I have to come up with a very special commercial that I can tempt and cultivate your attention, and you give up your will and you're tempted. Tempted, that means your emotion is overriding your wisdom. You see that?
Yes.
And I go buy it.
Well, you know, marketing. I read a article, a company in New York that has been around for many decades. Back when televisions were first invented, you know, they didn't have remote control. So if you changed the channel, you had to get up and go over and change the channel. So back then when commercials were done, they could pretty much depend that you were going to be sitting there watching the whole commercial. Because with the remote control, if you don't like the commercial, you can switch channels or turn it off or mute it.
Yeah.
And this marketing company said that the one thing that made all marketing campaigns successful was if it showed human beings coming together with one another, having fun. So the idea is, if you could present a product and make it seem that that product made you happy and made people like you, and you had lots of happy people around you when you had that product, you would associate that product with happiness and having friends and not being alone. So the idea of the remote control, what this marketing company said is that the attention span of humanity is very, very short now. No one wants to sit for 30 seconds and watch a commercial. So the trick is, he says, is when your commercial starts, you don't even know what the commercial is about until the very end. You might be selling a car, but it doesn't come at you that strong in the beginning because people are turned off by that approach. If you make it subtle and show the car taking you to a happy place and you're meeting happy people, and at the very end of the commercial, you notice it says commercial for this brand of car, the marketing of products is much more successful when you have people feeling as if that product is going to make them have love and compassion and people around them.
Well, that's exactly what we talked a little earlier about cognitive perception. I create a cognitive in other people's perception that by memory association, I associate, for example, what happiness with beer,
Right.
happiness with money, and materialism. That's why the man that I mentioned to you, George Gerbner, very famous psychologist, wrote a lot about cultivation theory. And one of his famous books is 4 Arguments of Television. How television cultivate these things in human being by cognitive perception and memory association. So every time I see this, I'm going to associate it with that.
Uh-huh. And you said there was 4?
He wrote a book, 4 Arguments of Television.
And what were those arguments? Do you remember?
Well, it's basically, one of them is a cognitive perception, association and temptation and all that. So somehow I get your compassion, your passion to override your wisdom. Because when emotionality goes over mentality, which is the mind outside, then that's temptation. I know, for example, smoking a cigarette, it hurts my lung, but I say, oh, it feels good.
So if you give your power away, you give your free will away, someone has taken that away from you and you didn't notice.
Yeah.
And they've allowed you to associate certain things with what your soul is really longing for. Because if the soul is longing for unity and to be a part of something greater than the self, and I'm the storyteller, I'm convincing you that if you do this, if you follow this process, follow this procedure and do these practices, you will be surrounded by happy people doing happy things, and you will accumulate lots of wealth.
You know what happens? If I do a commercial, then I make a commercial and you are watching it, I have to capture the cognitive perception to something which may not be even related to B.
Right.
But I connect it in such a nice way and media that all of a sudden you become tempted and you willingly go buy it.
Well, I'm oftentimes, I think of the traveling medicine show back before cars. People would come into town on a wagon, and they would say, look, I've got this elixir. It takes away all your pain.
Yeah.
Or, you know, look, I've got this beautiful lotion for your hair, your skin. And, you know, the person that sold this would come into town and go to the market and gather up people to convince them that his or her product was the greatest thing that they had never heard of.
Well, they do it on TV today much more effectively.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But the traveling medicine show, what if we got on in our wagons and went from town to town? I could be the troubadour, and you could have a look at these beautiful houses I can build for you.
Yeah, I can do it on your cell phone. I can do it on your Facebook or whatever, social media. You know, there's so many different ways that if I don't even agree with 9 of them, I'm gonna fall for the number 10.
Right.
So that's why.
In your studies, when you were studying architecture, you've combined architecture and understandings of naturopathic health.
Yes.
So like you at one point you have soul architecture.
So I have a slide here. Let me see if I can bring it. So it explains it a little bit better. It's here. Here. Can you see it?
Yes.
Now, the thing is, you know, most of the whole issue, if I go back to something and then come back here, is it okay?
Yes.
See what happened? For example, the food. And where was it? So, for example, a lemon. This lemon has to have energy to give it to me. This potatoes, they have to have this energy that we can measure with these little. It has to have that vibration. The vibration usually it can be translated into electricity, bioelectricity. It has to have that in order to give it to me. So if it doesn't, they give me a pill. But that pill, if you put that same electrodes on a pill, the light bulb doesn't go on. But if you put it on a potato, it goes on. If you put it on a lemon or a fruit, if it's live, it goes on. But if I put it on a best pill that you give me, most expensive pill, it doesn't go on. So that's what a lemon looks at a pill, and you know it's what yeah.
So you take a copper wire and a zinc wire and put it in a potato or a lemon.
You can order that in Amazon. They have those devices, you know. I usually
light up a light bulb, light up an LED.
Yeah, or you know, you can. I gave one of those, you know, that to my grand kid, you know, for that shows, you know, it's a clock. As long as the food is good, the clock ticks. As soon as the food is dead, the clock stops. Or the light stops. You know. So anyway, so everything has to have a vibration. You see that?
Mm-hmm. And so this inspired you to do this, to put those same concepts where we live in our shelters.
Yeah. And this vibration, it's emitted better than from the fingertips than any other parts of human body. So if we don't have it, there's no glow.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing, we have an aura around our body. We have aura around fingers. That's why, let's say Jesus wanted to heal people, he put his hand on his people's head.
Yes.
So that's why all of a sudden the hand will have energy. When you photograph it, it's vibrating. It has a vibration. Now, if I come and kill this vibration, put your hand on something, you know, that you don't have any vibration, such as what? Oscillation destroys what? Vibration. You remember we talked about that.
Right.
Now I have a cell phone in my hand. It's oscillatory. What does it do to my hand?
It depletes your field and flow.
Yeah. And then on top of it, there's a lot of other things. I just mentioned 2 or 3 of them. For example, RNA blue. You notice this vibration that comes out of us is kind of cobalt blue. This is the color of RNA. RNA is for regeneration, repair of the building. Cell phone or Wi-Fi destroys RNA of the body or biological system. So therefore, there is no ability, we are disabilitating the RNA to repair and regenerate when we go to sleep. And now how it affects the sleeps and all that, that's all different in the story. So all of a sudden, then the next thing, every organ has a blood barrier because we have, let's say, 22 or to 24 different amino acids. So each one of these amino acids is a building block for different organs. For example, our liver does not look like our heart or the brain. So each one of them, they need a different building block. So this blood barrier, like we have a blood barrier here, it prevents all those other amino acids to go into that organ. So this deactivates that. It destroys the RNA blue, which is the energy of RNA. And then, you know, if I have it in my hand, this is what happens. It destroys this vibration here. So that's why we need to have an environment. Let me bring that slide here. Our diet that goes, we receive our diet, one, from internally, from the food that we put inside to the outside. And we also have a diet from outside to go inside because everything is open function in the creation. Now, the food that goes in is our dietary intake. Now, the food which is out is what our body is in it. It's architecture. So that's why, you know, the vibration that comes from outside to inside and inside to outside, it's all both are very vital. So we need a vibrating architecture the same way we had a vibrating with a food with a vibration. So now the very most immediate need we have for survival is food, these 2 sources of vibration. One of them is shelter through architecture, and the food through agriculture. So both of these have to have vibration to give it to me and you. So therefore, you know, if you combine these 2, architecture and agriculture, I coined it as agri-tecture. And if we have a solar or magnetic input here into it, and then we have a science which is holistic for vibratory dietary needs, which is solar agriculture, solar agriculture architecture. We have to combine that in a building of a house in order to make a house self-sufficient for the basics.
So the house maintains a harmonious field and flow.
Yeah.
Just as we maintain that with our mental, emotional, physical, and when you spoke earlier about divinity.
Yeah, we have sometimes, you know, and like 20 some years ago, maybe 30 years ago, I used to use a spiritual, but then I realized a spirituality, to define a spirit is to deny and defy it, because it's not a component of time and space. Everything in our perception on this planet is a combination of time and space. Now, maybe on another planet, they don't have time and space. They have different things. They have different parameters, but everything, our existence is a integration of time and space here. So therefore, you know, a spirit cannot be defined in time and space, or God cannot be defined in time and space. Because if I define it, it's the definition of my perception. I created God instead of God who created me. So therefore, I changed the spirituality to divinity. So the components of our being is divinism, then is mentality, mental, emotional, and physical. Changing my divinity is my knowledge, because the true knowledge is by the revelation outside. The change in my mentality is my attitude. Changing my how I feel is my motivation, emotion. Changing what I can do physically is my skill. So we need to cultivate all of those four things at the same time in order to be a whole person in time and space. Now, since time and space is not ingredients of another planet, they have to do maybe different things. But in our planet, everything is time and space. Our perception, cognition is in time and space.
Well, you know, my cognition is telling me that the time and space for us to converse is closing.
Yeah, okay.
We are going to have to recycle and rebirth ourselves next week for another conversation.
Sure.
And I will go through these processes. When we go through these beautiful conversations, I feel as if I'm taking in this inspiration in a very divine way. It infuses my emotion with joy.
Yeah.
And I find that my body has more field and flow just from the passion involved in
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. See, one thing, if we have summarized this, our divinity has hierarchy over our mentality. And mentality has hierarchy over my emotionality.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionality over my physicality. Any of these, we change any of these hierarchy, this becomes temptation, becomes selfishness, narcissism, and all that stuff. There's all kind of diseases if we reverse that. So that's the hierarchy, as one congeals and coagulates to a lower order and lower order.
So from divinity to mentality, from mentality to emotionality, from emotionality to physicality.
Yeah. So that's why our divine, our mind, and then our heart, and then our physical. That's why we talked about the mind of your heart. That mind of the heart direct you in a wise way. And the heart of your mind, that your wisdom is combined with passion, or as Rumi said, logic or wisdom without passion is a flame that burns toward its own destruction.
Well, I bless you, my brother. Thank you for once again taking the time to share the biometry of life with our audience.
Yeah.
And we shall meet again, same time next week.
Yes, and sometimes you'll talk about biometry of heart and biometry of mind.
Beautiful. Something to look forward to. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Well, that's it for here and now. But until we meet again, this has been Louis-Virie Blanche thanking you for listening to Conversations with Elders on Glastonbury Radio 432. Bless you.
Quantum physics and the kitchen sink, the energy that follows the thoughts you think. Quantum physics and the cosmic sea, laws of nature too heavy for me. It's too cosmic, much too cosmic for me. Much too cosmic, much too cosmic for me.